to Toddler Parenting, Home for the Holidays with a Toddler Edition.
This is exciting for Emily and I because with the pandemic, we haven't been able to do much co-teaching. So this is a treat for us to get to be together and to get to be with parents of toddlers as we are heading into a holiday season that in any normal year brings its own sort of twist. And this is a double twist year. So it's just so good to get out of isolation for an hour and be reminded that there's other people in all those homes out there who are scratching their heads and being like, so how's this going to happen? And one of the things that Birth Roots has been working on figuring out for the past 8 or 9 months is what makes a Zoom platform teaching hour feel more community building and more engaging. And one of the answers is when you can sense who else is participating. So we thought we might use a couple of polls and a couple of reflection questions. So just to get started, while people are still arriving in the room, we have a poll that gives us a little bit of sense, gives Emily and I a little bit of sense, as well as you all with each other as part of this community. So the question is, how familiar are you with hand-in-hand parenting? And you can, if you depending on if you're using a tablet or a laptop, it's a touch screen option, or you can use your mouse. And we'll give it another 30 seconds or so to have everyone either move their mouse over the poll or touch the screen. And this is giving us a sense of how many of you might have already taken a class with Emily and I through Birth Roots, and that is where you were introduced to the concepts in hand, or for how many of you, and it looks like many of you, or if not most of you, this is an introduction. You're saying, oh, tell me more about hand in hand. I have a toddler and I'm in a pandemic and here come the holidays and it sounds like hand in hand might be for me. Let's see. So it looks like people who are present have rung in. And so just for your benefit, you can see who is in the webinar with us. So we have one more question that we want to ask. Or Em, do you want to make any comments about the results of the poll?
No, just, oh, well, yes. Just that it's totally okay that you've never heard of hand-in-hand parenting. It's the concepts and the ideas are things that we weave into all of our work at Birth Roots, but we don't often explicitly say, here's a hand-in-hand parenting idea or concept. And I'll tell you a little bit more about hand-in-hand parenting in just a minute. So let's see. I'm going to attempt this is actually, oh, the other thing we should tell you is this is the first time Leah and I have used the webinar format in Zoom. We've taught a gazillion classes during the pandemic in the regular Zoom platform, but this webinar platform is something that's new to us. So we'll experiment together. Let's see. I'm trying to show you one other poll.
So just as another method for building a little bit of sense of connection with each other, so that you feel like you're, while we're not physically in a room with each other, the polls that we'll use today, as well as some reflection questions and chat box allows us. Okay, so here's our second poll. Just curious, for those in attendance today, how do you experience the December holidays sort of growing up now that you have your own family? Is this a religious holiday for you or more of a secular holiday for you? Do you also weave in holidays that are less mainstream, maybe solstice or Kwanzaa? So give us a chance in the next 30 seconds to get a picture of how the December holidays are experienced by you and for us as a group of people spending the next hour together. So, and you can answer more than one. You might, all of the above might be how you do the December holidays. You might do them all, and you might have another one we haven't listed. So this is just helping us. Parents have a lot of questions, especially as their children leave babyhood and then they start to leave toddlerhood, and there's narrative involved in the holidays, and there's often a lot of questions about, well, I grew up with this narrative, and is that the exact same narrative I want to pass on to my child, or am I going to tweak it at all? So it looks like 93% of the people here today definitely celebrate the secular or cultural components of Christmas. Perhaps that means having a tree, or having certain special meals or foods or songs. Trying to decide whether Santa is part of that narrative or not. 11% it is a religious holiday, 25% either celebrate Hanukkah solely or a mix of Hanukkah and Christmas, and 18% solstice and 7% Kwanzaa. So we got a good mix, but that's the community of people who happen to come today. We could do this again tomorrow and get a different result of the poll. So that's our group. So far, there's 31 people in attendance. We'll see if more people are joining. If you have a pen and paper nearby or handy, there's going to be a couple points at which we do some reflecting, and it helps to just jot. You don't have to do like a long journal entry, but just maybe like a laundry list of like, here's what's on my mind. And we're going to ask you if you could write questions that you have through the whole presentation down on your piece of paper, and don't enter them into the chat box quite yet, because we're going to do some interactive chat box. Then we'll do Q&A at the very end. So questions that are coming up for you, write them down and add them at the very end. I just want to say welcome one more time, because people were still joining, and to say that this is a Birth Roots program, which means it's about community and community building and perspective and feeling less crazy and less like, what am I doing wrong? And then being like, oh, I'm not doing it wrong. It's just challenging. And so some people will be entering into the month of December, trying to create some normalcy and trying to fulfill some fantasies about what December is supposed to bring, which can bring up some feelings of enoughness. Other people are just feeling sort of flat and like, I don't know how to do this particular year due to the pandemic and the not socializing in ways we normally socialize. But I just want to name a couple of things. You're all living with toddlers. Toddlers do all kinds of things that make us think, am I doing this wrong? And some of you love the toddler phase, and it's not a requirement to have a family that you love the toddler phase. So some love toddler phase, some don't. Some love holidays, some don't. Some love webinars, some don't. But we are here to support each other. And I just want to name one more thing as sort of like setting the tone for today is the holidays put there's a cultural message that the holidays put a lot of pressure on us to, one, be a good parent, and two, to have good children. Being a good parent and having good children is sort of magnified by the holidays. And so we're hoping that how we're able to spend the next hour together will take some of that heavy, I can't even breathe, pressure off, and we can actually enjoy both our children as in their toddler phase as holidays happening during a pandemic. So, do you want to talk about the plan for today?
Yeah, so an hour is a very short amount of time. We wish we had a lot more with you, and we wish we could actually be in the same room together. But we want our focus of the day to be that you leave today's webinar with a couple of new, or maybe more thought through or added to what you already know, ideas about how our emotional system works. So a couple more frameworks for thinking about how emotions work, how regulation works, what happens when we lose it, what happens when we see tantrums. So just a different way of thinking about those things. We want to map out some kind of cultural thinking, holiday thinking around what is really truly developmentally appropriate for toddlers. Like, where do our expectations meet their actual abilities? And then the last thing, we want to give you some specific ideas about how the toddler years and holidays throughout the toddler years can go a little smoother. So you leave with some really specific ideas that you can cherry pick from. And as with all things birth roots, we know there's no one right way to do this. There's no perfect, it's just not going to happen. So we welcome you to cherry pick the things that feel like a fit for your family, leave the things that don't, and just kind of let things sink in and tuck them away for ideas and inspiration that you can customize for yourself.
So just a brief little introduction for some of you who may be new to Birth Roots. Emily and I met in 2002. We were both doulas at that time. Just as a bit of perspective, there was no smartphones, there was no social media, there was no Amazon Prime. Parents were very isolated, and so we started a nonprofit organization. It became a nonprofit in 2004. And one of the things that I think sets Birth Roots programming apart from things you might find elsewhere is Emily and I, for a very long time, have been listening very deeply to what parents are telling us they do and don't need and want. And so much of our program is in response to what parents have told us they need and value and are hungry for the most. And so we listen down at the level of the roots as opposed to the leaves changing season up high. So we're here in Portland, Maine. We may have some people here today that are not in Cumberland County, Maine. We have been, for the last 9 months, similar to the needs that we saw and responded to in 2004, the early 2000s, in 2020, we're like, okay, parents have some different needs, some new needs, and we're putting our minds together to respond to those different and new needs.
Let's see, about 7 or so years ago, Leah and I decided that we wanted to keep expanding the programming at Birth Roots. When we first started, we really just offered childbirth education and a postnatal class called Blossoming Newborns Buds, and kind of, held families in that tiny window. And over the years, we've just branched out farther and farther. So eventually, parents would say to us after their Buds and Sprouts classes were done, oh, don't you have more? Can't you do more for us? We don't want to leave yet. So we keep bringing more programming on to support everyone. And we chose hand-in-hand parenting because it was so well aligned already with how we are and what we do at Birth Roots. That idea of there's no one right way, there's no perfect, all parents are good, all children are good, doing the best they can with the resources they have. And what hand-in-hand parenting brings is 5 specific flexible tools that parents can use in their families, use for themselves. So those are woven into today's workshop. And after today's webinar, we'll also be sending you an email with a bunch more resources, since we won't be able to cover nearly as much as we want to today. So you can get more information about hand-in-hand and Birth Roots after today's webinar too. So I'm going to go ahead and do a screen share. Those of you who have taken the toddler parenting class, you'll recognize some of these features. We spend a little bit more time on them in our traditional monthly toddler parenting class, but we're just going to skim over them today because these are the concepts that we want you to understand as a framework for moving into the holiday season and understanding your toddler's emotional meltdowns, and maybe your own as well, because we're human. We have our own parental meltdowns as well. So from a simplistic perspective, people who study the brain and study how our brain works, how emotions work, can get into way more detail. But for today's purposes, we're just going to give some broad strokes to understand the different parts of our brain and how they work together. So if you've taken a birth class with Leah or some of our postnatal classes, you'll remember the neocortex. From a hand-in-hand perspective, we call this the thinking brain. And the thinking brain is really good at logic and reason and planning and numbers and language. It understands words, it can process words, it can make sense of things. And the limbic system is older and more simple, not nearly as complex as our brilliant thinking brains. The emotional system is a way that we refer to it, but this is where our fight, flight, and freeze response is. This is what keeps us safe as humans. We have these innate reflexes and reactions that are here to protect us. This is where our feelings live, our senses, our memories, emotions, and it's very concerned with right now. Whereas the neocortex, the thinking brain, can think way out into the future. It can look at lots of different options. But from a really simplistic perspective, the neocortex is responding based on all of these things that it's reviewing in its very complex and quick system. Whereas the limbic system is all about reaction. It needs to react quickly and extremely to keep us safe. Now, the tricky thing about the neocortex and the limbic system is the limbic system is going to base its reaction not necessarily on all the data that the neocortex could. It's just going to react to, do I feel safe right now? Yes or no? And quickly move into that fight, flight, or freeze response. So this is what happens when you say something simple like, it's time to put your shoes on, and your toddler falls on the floor into a puddle. How could you? How dare you? Just insinuate that it's time to move from place A to place B. That is terrifying for them. So they're in immediate fight, flight, freeze, and they're just reacting, protecting themselves. It's not a lion at the door, but it feels like it to them. It really feels like it. And this is also why we sometimes lose it, even though we know we want to parent in a certain way. We know how we want to do things, but sometimes our limbic system gets overwhelmed. We get flooded. We're stressed, we're tired. All of those things make it easier for us to lose access to our thinking brain. So the other analogy I want to leave you with for today is every human has a feelings cup and a connection cup in their emotional system. Now this gets a little tricky because in an ideal world, we humans, toddlers and adults, work best when our feelings cup is low or nearly empty, and our feelings cup, our connection cup is full, brimming over the top. So this is where we have our most patience, our creativity, flexibility, all of those things flow best when our feelings cup is low and our connection cup is high. But routinely, regularly, we can't keep them in this state always because we're living, and the feelings cup is filling and the connection cup is draining. So regularly our feelings cup gets fuller and fuller and fuller until we lose it, or our toddlers do. And then of course, again, they're the puddle on the floor. So we want to find ways to drain the feelings cup as much as we can, whenever we can. And we want to find ways to fill the connection cup as much as we can, whenever we can. Because this is the preventive maintenance that keeps our emotional system gears turning well. This keeps us in a regulated state as much as we can. We can't avoid all upsets. We can't avoid all hurts. That's just impossible. Life just pours them in. Your toddler sees you talking on the phone, and that moment of separation pours in a hurt, pours in a feeling. But if you're able to add in some connection and give them opportunities to shed those feelings of fear when they didn't have your attention right when they wanted it, they're going to less likely and less extremely get to this volcano state. So piggybacking on those ideas, we find that when you have a picture, when you have an image, it can be easier to find it in the emotional moments of your day. So we add these little pictures so this information can be stored in more accessible parts of your neocortex. So we've put them together with little phrases that you can use to kind of pull out of your back pocket when you're heading toward an emotional moment. Connect before you correct is a term that lots of different philosophies use. But anytime you're going to move in and set a limit or make a transition, the more you can connect ahead of time, meaning if you're getting ready to leave the house, rather than just say, it's time to go, let's move on to get our shoes on. joining with them in whatever they're doing for even 30 seconds and really tuning into them, tuning into their activity, making physical contact. That's a connection. So when you make those connections before you either set a limit or make a transition, it's going to go smoother because it's not such a breach of signal for them. This signal tower represents you as the parent, and this little radio represents your child. They would actually prefer, they would like to have your signal strong and clear and at its peak wattage 24/7. That's what they would like. And that is not humanly possible for us to do as parents. So, but we can strategically use this connection and this signal. We can pour in connection, thinking of this as like a battery system. And especially as they get older. As children get older, they get more and more and more capacity for storing your connection. A 1-year-old does not have the same capacity, even as a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old. It's like each year they get more battery to store. So investing that connection, investing your attention is what they need. Connection is what they need. It's attention seeking, and connection seeking is not a bad thing. It's a need as much as food or air for us as humans. So invest that connection, boost their battery before you move on to something new, before you attempt something like a holiday meal where you might want them to sit at a table with you for as long as they can possibly do it with their toddler development. Or before a family visit, or before you want them to be on a Zoom call with grandma. Do this boost of connection where you give them that full wattage that they're looking for, that they need. Because when they can't find it, when they're seeking you and they can't find you, the behaviors that come out to signal that they need you and that they are looking for you can be a little messy. So the last tip here is a way to expand your signal strength, to extend your signal strength, is to strategically make connections throughout your day. So if you are spending a long holiday day with family that's nearby, or if you are interrupting your schedules, making sure you're doing mini doses of connection regularly, like as often as they might need to eat or use the bathroom, or change their diapers. Like, this is how often you also want to do a mini dose of deep connection for your child. So tuning everything else out and focusing solely on them for a small period of time really helps things flow better. So those are the basic things that we cover in our toddler parenting class. And that's kind of the foundation that we use the hand-in-hand parenting tools on. So we want to ask you, maybe it's the thing that brought you to this webinar today. Maybe it's something you're dreading or something you just can't quite figure out. But go ahead and put in the chat box or jot down to yourself. This is where you could do a little laundry list of using this framework in a new way now. So think about your connection cup. Think about your feelings cup as a parent. And what are things you can think of off the top of your head that fill your connection cup around the holidays? And what are things that fill your feelings cups? Because once we know these things, once we can kind of see them ahead of time and have this framework, then we can get ahead of them so they don't kind of blindside us and take us by surprise. So go ahead and jot those things down. I'm gonna go turn my heater off because it's about to get loud. I'll be right back.
So we have a great example of things that in the chat box, someone gave a really excellent example. So
Mhm.
the connection cup, some time off from work. Yes, yes, absolutely. Not being at work or not having the pressure that you should be working from home. And then the feelings cup, work. Huge expectations on us that pull us away. And then tantrums is a topic that we are definitely going to spend some time on today. And just having an hour to pause and have someone ask you the question, what's hard about the holidays? What do you love about the holidays? What's hard about toddlers for you? What do you love about toddlers? It's important to be asked these questions. So someone else added that that normally it would be a connection filler to see extended family, but since this is not happening this year, it adds to our sense of to-do list to reinvent the holidays and reinvent something that will feel magical or special or enough or memorable, making memories.
And it's so, the holidays are so funny and so unique. I mean, they are as unique as our families are and are unique as our parenting styles are. But for so many of us, the being with families is the tough part. And for so many of us, the being with the families is the refilling part. So we don't make assumptions about the parts that are fueling you and the parts that are draining you. It's why we ask these kinds of questions, because once you know, and once you put names to it and put perspective around it, you can think about it in new ways and creative ways. So we also, I'm going to add a quick poll here, because again, it's so rare these days, especially for parents to have any kind of reflection time or any kind of time to digest their own experiences. So how is your feelings cup these days? So light and empty. Maybe there's a little in there, but it spills out sometimes. Maybe you're sloshing over the sides, or my people with the so much erupting. So we do have some tools to support parents with their own eruptions that we'll send you information after today's webinar and just pack it full of some extra resources. So if you're an erupty parent, don't worry, we've got something for you. And we have some tools that help you manage your emotional system so your own gears can be in really good shape before the holidays. Because it's way easier to be with a toddler and witness their experience as a human if our emotional systems are in good shape. Because if we're spilling over, it's hard to contain our own spilling when they're spilling. It just is a bit of a trigger, mousetrap scenario. The dominoes just keep falling and falling with everyone triggering each other. So yes, I think you're all in really good company. I'm so shocked that no one's in the light and empty spot. So shocked. There's hope. Someday we might get there. It's been a while. So I will. Here's where we are. So good company. You're in good company here. So let's see. So I want to talk about prevention. We're going to do some prevention work and some kind of acute care work. I like to talk about the hand-in-hand parenting tools as they are multi-purpose tools. They are prevention tools, they're acute care tools, and they're repair tools. So if you lose it and your whole cup spills over and sloshes on top of everybody around you, these tools also work for repair. We won't get in detail in that in today's webinar, but you'll get some resources later. So we talked about the mini doses of connection that you can sprinkle throughout your day. Something that we'll send you after the webinar is an actual list of how to boost daily caregiving routines with more connection, with more attention, so you can really plump things up. Something that happens, especially when we're tired and overwhelmed, is we can go through daily caregiving routines in a little bit of a transactional way where, you know, the diaper change, you just want to get it done and get it done fast. But occasionally, not everyone, because nobody has time for that, but occasional diaper changes, slow down really far and just make it a time to enjoy them, to nuzzle their belly, to try to eat their toes, to, you know, let them stick their finger up your nose, whatever it is toddlers do while you're trying to change their diaper. But a 3-minute diaper change is an example of how you can really boost connection for the next hour. So for the next hour after that connection boost, their feelings cup and connection cup are going to be in good shape. So they will be more flexible, more creative, more able to find something to do and enjoy it. Not always, but the odds are going to be in your favor if you do these little doses of connection. Another thing that really helps preventively is to add in some rough and tumble physical play, like some crashing, some bashing, some like skin on skin play. It might be that you say, oh, I hope no one pushes me over as you're sitting on the floor, with a little sparkle in your eye, like a little almost wink to them to invite them to knock you over. So they will come running at you, you'll knock over, you'll make a big funny play of it. And then you'll sit back up and dust yourself off and get prim and proper again and say, oh, whew, that, I don't know what that just happened. That was a big breeze. And say, oh, I hope I don't get knocked over again. But this kind of rough play is so, like, they can literally feel your connection when you're playing roughly together. So find opportunities ahead of time, ahead of big feelings, ahead of transitions, ahead of high expectations, to boost that physical sensation of connection with them. And play in general is oil in the gears of the emotional system. It can be hard for us as parents to find playfulness when we are overwhelmed and tired and fried and doing all the things and then adding holidays on top of it. We have some tips for you that we'll send after today's class for how to kind of build that play muscle for yourself. But I'll tell you the one thing that really helps me. When I first found hand-in-hand parenting, the tool that's called play listening was my least favorite. I hated it with every fiber of my being. I didn't want to play. I was annoyed that I was being asked to play. And eventually now it's become my most favorite. But in the beginning, I actually set a timer when I wanted to rally myself for some play. So even for 3 minutes, these little 2 to 3 minute things, I swear, can make such a difference in how your day flows, in how they're able to be the good humans that they are as toddlers and not quite so melty. Something that is nearly universal for toddlers is a sense of powerlessness. They really don't have a whole lot of say over what goes on in their lives. They're always kind of wondering, like, what's next? What is that adult saying? I'm not really sure I understand what they mean. They just said a lot of words and I only understood 2 of them. So for toddlers, experiencing life is a lot of, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what they want. I don't know where we're going. You know, my body gets picked up and moved across the house at regular intervals. So this sense of powerlessness can be a hurt in their feelings cup. And sometimes these hurts in their feelings cup can even be like, you know, sticking an Alka-Seltzer or an Emergen-C in a water. Like it causes their whole cup to just fly over when these little bits of powerlessness get added to their feelings cup. So something we can do as parents is to play around the whole topic of powerlessness on a pretty regular basis. And this is, you know, beyond the holidays, just in general with toddlers. But the holidays themselves, I mean, think about all of the things that happen during the holidays on top of normal powerlessness that toddlers feel. You know, there are people that they don't know so well who are cooing and oohing over them. Grandma wants a hug, but they haven't seen grandma in the last month. There might be long car rides. You might be messing with their schedules. You might be asking them to sit in front of a screen and interact with someone on a screen.
Wearing particular clothing that they didn't pick
Right.
out, or a photo where you want them to smile, sit still at a table for a meal.
Yeah. None of those are things that are easy for toddlers. So that's asking a lot of them. That will fill their feelings cup and drain their connection cup very quickly. I told you about my I hope no one knocks me over, but other examples of power games that you can play are I hope no one steals my socks. That is a really fun one, especially if everyone gets in on it. Knocks over my blocks, climbs on my head. Those are fun things. I bet you can't push me over, pull me off the couch, knock me off the bed, beat me to the kitchen. Toddlers love it, just love it when they can win. The whole idea behind this is the tool called play listening in hand parenting is for this chunk of time, we commit to being the bumbling, the lesser. They get to be the smartest, the fastest, the strongest, the most clever, and they just relish in it. You will see your child bloom when you play these games. They will delightfully best you every time. So look for opportunities to let them win and even ham up your loss. Like flop on the floor and try to drag yourself to the kitchen as they get across the finish line. And one other area that I wanted to give you some solid tools, some solid games to work on is around separation anxiety, neediness, whininess, clinginess. All of those fit under the umbrella of separation fears. So some really fun games to play around that topic are two adults take either end of a toddler and have a playful tug of war about who wants them more, who needs them more. Oh, no, they're mine. I must have them. No, they're mine. I want them the most. I mean, who doesn't like to have their adoring fans fight over them? But if they are, another one is if they're kind of moving out of the room or leaving the couch, you can playfully say, oh no, please don't go, and invite them to reject you, invite them to run away, invite them to escape your grasp, like, oh, try to grab their shirt and be like, no, don't go. Pull them just a little bit, but let them win every time. Those are really fun ways to play with leaving, with missing people, with not feeling super full in their connection cup. Those really pour in the extras in the connection cup. So those are our preventive ideas for you. Leah's going to talk about some acute care options.
So toddlers, they have not mastered when and where is the best time to have big feelings yet. And it's not because you haven't parented them enough or well, or you haven't upped your game as a parent, or if only you would do the right thing as a parent, then your toddler would be less emotional or less messy with their emotions. So if anyone has been with me in a Buds newborns class, people will say, I have a 3-week-old who's not on a schedule yet. What am I doing wrong that my 3-week-old doesn't go to bed on a schedule and feed on a schedule and have scheduled naps? And I say, it's just that they're 3 weeks old and they won't until they're at least 3 months old. So it's a mismatch of expectations. And so more often than not, our hopes and wishes and dreams and fantasies about what toddlers are capable of. It's just a misalignment of they're not going to be able to do that for quite some time. And so one of the ways that we talk about emotional regulation is a little bit like potty training. So some of the stages of potty training look like your toddler might start to let you know that they have a messy diaper, or they might start to be like, I'm pooping right now. And then they'll say, I think I'm going to poop very soon. And then the fourth step is I can think of it in enough time to get myself or ask you to help me to get to a toilet in time. And so to hope and wish and dream that a toddler will be able to manage their emotions is kind of like hoping a 3-week-old will be on a schedule or hoping that a 1-year-old can be potty trained. So we have, as adults, as parents, and particularly as parents of toddlers, we wake up every morning, and we wake up on special mornings in particular, and we think maybe it won't happen today. Maybe today's the day that my toddler will stay emotionally regulated, that there won't be any tantrums. Probably they won't have any tantrums on a special holiday, right? And so one of the things Emily and I do,
they got the gift that they wanted. They should be so happy.
Right, is we're here to tell you they are definitely going to have a tantrum on the special holiday, in the middle of the special holiday, because they're toddlers. And so if we can show up with like totally ready, like I knew it was going to happen. And so one of the ways I describe the toddler tantrum is that it's like Old Faithful. Old Faithful is a geyser in a national park out west that about every 90 minutes, the hot water just sprays up. And it's not because somebody did something wrong or they failed to be a good parent or someone should have prevented the geyser. It's just what geysers do. And so what I find so compelling about the Old Faithful metaphor is that Old Faithful erupts 17 times a day, which is about what you should expect from a toddler. A toddler is going to have approximately 17 tantrums a day. And if 16 of those you're like, oh man, I didn't think this was going to happen. I really knew this was the day we weren't going to have 16 extra tantrums. But if instead you could be like, all right, so let's plan our whatever's going to be special about the holidays, what's coming our way, and weave into that time and space and patience for Old Faithful, who will erupt. Old Faithful will definitely erupt. And to the degree that we get kind of savvy and sophisticated around being like, there it is. I knew you were coming. I totally knew that tantrum would show up, just like I knew that Old Faithful would erupt. So if you can hold in your mind when you look at your child who has just thrown themselves on the floor and they're screaming and kicking, if instead of whipping yourself and flocking yourself and saying, if only I had done something differently, if only I had been a better parent, this child would not be throwing themselves on the floor, kicking and screaming. But if you can superimpose over your eyes, and when you see that toddler erupting, you just see a geyser. It's a natural phenomenon. And so we wanted to, one of my favorites, when Emily was talking about the neocortex and the limbic system, it helps me when either the child, my child, or me have left the realm of the neocortex and have entered realm of the limbic system, have a little catchphrase for that of like, oh, a limbic hijack has just happened. And so it's just being able to name it. Either the child and or the adult is in a place of limbic hijack and the geyser is going off. So did we have another slide about different ways that people sometimes respond to
We do.
So just check in with yourself right now. It's a tiny reflection question. You may or may not write it down, but when the tantrum shows up, you can feel it brewing. Like eventually you've lived with a toddler long enough that your little antenna are going to be like, the tantrum's brewing. Oh, it's spilling. Here's a tantrum. There are some common reactions that we have. One is to distract them of like, oh, guess what it's time for? We're going to do this book, we're going to eat this snack, we're going to watch this show, and we just do anything that we can figure out to make the tantrum not happen. That's just something we do sometimes. It's not like you're a good parent or a bad parent. It's just something we do sometimes. When we talk about a missed tantrum, we talk about it like a missed opportunity, or it's basically a tantrum paused. It didn't happen right now, but that doesn't mean it's gone forever, it went away, or it magically poofed. It's just paused. Sometimes when the tantrum comes, and see if you can identify yourself, maybe you're all of these things at certain times, is we try to lecture about the rightness and the wrongness of things. We're trying to reach their neocortex while they are in their limbic system. So we remind them about what the rule was. We can't, the rule is no hitting. The rule is no yelling. The rule is no throwing. You shouldn't have thrown. We need to review the rules. Don't you remember? We shouldn't throw things. And that is a conversation that needs to happen when somebody is not in their limbic system. And so there's, around the holidays, there's some special ways that we have all been enculturated to try to avert the tantrums that have to do with being good and nice. And if you're good and nice, somehow you're going to get some presents. And so this is just a chance to breathe and be in your body for a second and notice, was any of that happening for you when you were a young person? Did anyone ever said, Santa or an elf is watching you, and if you're not nice, if you're not good enough, you won't get gifts? It was that used. And even if you're the sort of parent who's thinking, I would never do that to your child, you get pressed, you get backed into a corner, you get exhausted, depleted, and these things come out of your mouth and you're like, I can't believe I just said that. I just said the nice and naughty thing.
My husband actually literally one year said, I'm going to cancel Christmas. That came out of his mouth. It's now become a family joke, but these things erupt out of your mouth when you're overwhelmed.
Yes, right. So we just want to acknowledge that all people, we are human. It is normal that we try to distract, that we try to lecture, that we try to, the tantrum's trying to happen about a wrong color cup or a cookie that broke. And instead of being like, oh, great opportunity for this tantrum to spin itself out and exhaust itself and us to, what Emily's going to talk about in a minute, we say, oh, don't worry, I can get you a fresh cookie that is not broken. Or you don't like that color cup? How about this color cup? How about this color cup? This color cup? And so just observe that this happens sometimes, but there's another way. There's another way to approach tantrums that is at the heart, for me, of hand-in-hand work, is having a really different response to that tantrum. It's starting to erupt out of our child. And instead of tensing up and hoping it won't happen, hoping beyond hope, we have a different response. And hand-in-hand calls that stay listening.
And we actually want you to think about tantrums the same way we think about poop. Like, we want poop to happen regularly, even though it's gross and messy and often inconvenient and sometimes makes a huge mess.
For any of you out there who've had a constipated child, you want
the poop. So when we see tears and tantrums as the normal, natural byproduct of living as a human, they become a lot easier to listen to. So the tool is called Stay Listening. And in the post event email, we'll send you some really specifics about what do we actually mean? What do you actually say during Stay Listening? But for today, we wanted to give you a snapshot of what it means. So in Stay Listening, you're not trying to fix it. For this moment in time, for however long it takes them to get that emotional poop out in the form of a tantrum, you're going to stay close. You're going to focus your attention on them. Breathe slowly so you are regulated and not about to overflow with your own emotions and upsets. Because what we want is to be like an anchor for them as they are the boat in the middle of a storm. So our connection and our attention is what makes things safe for them to let all of those feelings out. So we just listen. We're not judging, we're not teaching. This is not the teachable moment. We wait until they have access to their neocortex before we try to use words really much at all. And we trust their goodness. We see that they are just having a hard time. They're in the middle of an emotional emergency. They're not trying to make things difficult for us. And this is a concept that, again, is across many kind of gentle parenting, respectful parenting approaches, but they're having a hard time not giving you a hard time. They just need to get those feelings up and out. So let me do a quick time check. We have about 10 minutes left. We wanted to give you this image for yourself too, of being this regulated person, this regulated being and presence for your child. This is something that is a lifelong practice. This is not easy. It doesn't happen every time, but the ability to stay in regulation, which means in your thinking brain, able to breathe slowly, able to have perspective, this is what you're going for as the person who is stay listening to your child. The more you can return to regulation in the midst of their dysregulation, that will build resilience for you. And then you can be like the lighthouse for them so they can return to regulation as well. So this is like you are literally rewiring your brain as you're doing these things. So it's difficult, it's not easy, but it's a practice. We keep returning to regulation together. We do it hopefully first so they can follow us out of their tantrum. So I think for our last 10 minutes, Leah, check me if you're thinking differently. Let's talk about making plans for the holidays that are toddler appropriate, that are developmentally appropriate. How can we mix things in?
One of the sort of connections I wanted to make, I'm not sure if anyone in today's group has been with me in the outdoor classroom for the toddler nature camp. And one of the things that I talk about there is we have purposely created an environment and a physical space that is a yes zone. It's about a 90% yes zone. There's no such thing as a 100% yes zone because other people's bodies need to be kept safe. So there are a few limitations that we have to make, but for the most part, we've created a space that was only a 50% yes zone. There were choking hazards in it. There were unsafe ways of being, and we've redesigned it. We've engineered it so that a toddler can succeed and be brave and be curious and inquisitive by thinking, what would it take for this to be a 90% yes zone so that we can trust toddlers to use their smart brains and be curious about the world. And so to kind of translate that or overlay that onto the holidays. So what would it actually take to make the holidays less of a no zone for someone who is in the toddler developmental phase and much more of a yes zone? So if there are breakable things that are part of your holiday decorations or somebody's holiday decorations, is it even fair to ask someone who is a toddler not to touch that breakable thing? Or do we just reorganize the space? Checking in with, are we making reasonable expectations of somebody who's a toddler, who's like 1, 2, 3, to sit for an extended period of time at a meal table. This comes up a lot in the outdoor classroom. My toddler will only focus on eating a meal for like 3 minutes. Yes, they don't have 30 minutes in them. So how can we make the most of that 3 minutes so that that special moment happens in their 3-minute window? Or do we feed a toddler before the meal, and then the meal is really about connecting and being all at the same table in a different kind of way where the food stuff isn't coming up? And so I wanted to give you a chance to sort of reflect and review, am I about to, in the month of December, be out of line with toddler development in my expectations and set us up for a power struggle or not feeling connected to each other because I'm pressuring my toddler to do something they're actually not capable of. So with that model of the outdoor classroom was transformed into a yes zone. And it's not that I think you can or should turn every environment that you're always in with your toddler into a 90% yes zone, but simply being aware of like, ooh, we are in only a 50% yes zone. My parenting is going to be super intensive if I'm going to be with a toddler in a 50% yes zone. Whereas I get to relax a whole lot more as a parent if I'm with a toddler in a 90% yes zone because I don't have to micromanage them all the time. So the one last thing I did want to say about while the tantrum is happening, I just wanted to reiterate, because this is a hard shift. It's a paradigm shift, basically, from the paradigm that we are all steeped in the culture at large, is that tantrums are naughty behavior and that we have to teach our children not to do naughty behavior. Instead of tantrums are emotionally healthy, normal part of everyday life. Rename it if you want. I mean, I think calling it a tantrum might set us up to be like, yeah, I got to get my child to stop. Some people call it venting. Some people call it a meltdown. Some people call it overload or overflow, or whatever word takes that sort of edge of judgment out of the thing that's happening. And realizing that while the tantrum is happening, you're not just sitting there biding your time, like waiting for it to end. Like, is this going to take 10 minutes or what? You're actually keeping yourself regulated as a model for that resilient relationship between you and your child. So thinking about what you love about them, thinking about who they are when they're not having a tantrum, and having opportunity. And I know this is Emily's reference that this is going to come out in after event email, to reflect with someone else in like a listening partnership. What happened for you during the holidays when you were your child's age? What happened for you when you were your child's age and you had an emotional Old Faithful overflow geyser? How were you responded to? Did anyone sit down on the floor and breathe slowly and just listen deeply to you? Or did they do something else? So we quickly want to recap what we were able to cover today about the thinking brain and the feeling brain, that neocortex and limbic system, and how being aware of which one we are in and which one our child is in is going to go a long way for deciding how to proceed when in any given situation that the holiday put us in. Having a chance to look at what the holidays might include and rethink or re-engineer, is that really going to work? Is this our chance to have them reflect on a couple of these questions?
Yeah, well, I wanted the last thing that they leave with to be these ideas that we brought to the webinar of, here are some examples of ways that we can rework the holidays so they are more developmentally appropriate. So we're setting our families up for, I mean, success isn't the right word, but setting our families up for more enjoyment, for less management. And I would love to welcome everyone to put into the chat any ideas that you're currently kind of thinking about or working on, to share with everyone else. What are you doing differently this year that is more toddler friendly? What have you done? From switching to LED candles to if you have a Christmas tree, using not breakable ornaments. What have you had to do this year to make things more toddler friendly?
Yeah.
And we can certainly open up on the event page to some more ideas. All the breakables out of reach. It just makes it so much easier as a parent if you don't have to be the behavior police all the time of, no, don't touch that, no, don't touch that. This is a really hard line to hold. It's exhausting. So the more you can make the space accommodating to everyone's developmental needs, the easier it will be for you to relax as a parent. Oh, a Velcro Christmas tree, that's fun. They really can joyfully take ornaments on and off and on and off as many times as they want. So keep those coming as we're wrapping up. We want to leave you today with what's next. Or Leah, any other last thoughts? Topic thoughts before we talk about what's next that you wanted to make sure get in there?
We did have one person email in a question that was on their mind about identifying one's child as maybe spirited, a spirited child who's more intense, whose reactions are more intense than you've observed in other people's children. And a little piece that I like to have people look at their spirited child through is making sure we really understand the neurodiversity of people, and that some people are sensory seeking and needing more sensory input, and some people are sensory sensitive and needing more sensory distancing. And when we get that wrong, when we're not tuned into which one our child is, it can sort of flare up the spiritedness of the child. And so if your child who you've identified as spirited is actually a sensory seeking child, then that one might be needing more roughhousing, pillow fighting, throwing down on the bed, kind of full body contact play. And then the spirited stuff calms down. On the flip side, if you have a child who's sensory sensitive and sensory distancing, cutting down all the holiday stimulation might be the secret to your success, because when you can read your child's need for more input or less input, some of their behaviors that we tend to label as spirited just calm down because they're getting enough or not too much input. So I just want to thank you for the person who wrote ahead to ask that question.
None of this is easy work. Parenting is really difficult work, and especially difficult this year with so many weird things happening and so many extra stresses on us. So what's next for Birth Roots is we do have a new program we're rolling out just for this year. We're calling 100 Days of Winter, where we're inviting as many people as who want to join us for 3 months of, you get a weekly email with some little pep talks, some ideas for connection. We're going to kind of weave in these little micro connection ideas, these little play ideas for you. So you don't have to think of them, because thinking of what to do is exhausting. So we're just gonna try to keep feeding you these ideas throughout the next few months, and build a sense of community around, we're all in this together. We can share ideas with each other, share support with each other. We can kind of work together to figure out where the needs are and fuel them. So I believe for the next 24 hours, is that true, Leah? You can get into 100 Days of Winter with any donation to our Resilient Roots campaign. So the kind of retail price for this program is $100 for 100 Days of Winter. But truly, you can donate $1 to the Resilient Roots campaign in the next 24 hours and get a coupon code so you can get into the group for that level. So we'll send a link after that, and it's something we welcome you to share with anyone from anywhere. It doesn't have to be just Maine people, because it'll all be online. And we do have our Resilient Roots campaign going on right now, which is a big fundraising campaign for us. As with everybody, 2020 has knocked the stuffing out of a lot of what we do. So we're working on getting some fundraising together so we can be in a thriving place in 2021, so we can keep supporting families. And then last bit of what's next, I'm going to send a bunch of links in our post-event email that will get you some extra tools, ideas. I would love for you to consider us your personal hand-in-hand parenting librarian. So if you, as you're going through those emails, post in the event for the next few days, Leah and I will just be checking the event page on Facebook, and we'll link you to things that'll add some resources. We'll answer some questions there, but let us support you and stay in contact with us so we know how best to do that. And we're just really glad you came. And that we get to be with you.
I did want to at least name, I know we don't have tons more time, but so stay listening and play listening are, I would call 2/3 of Hand in Hand. And just so you don't feel like, how come this isn't as easy as they made it sound? The third tier of that is something called listening partnership. And that is where the adult gets to be like, this is so hard because I didn't get this kind of parenting. I'll just give you just a tiny little example. Like my daughter, when she gets to pick the plaything, she picks bucking bronco, where I'm the bronco and she sits on my back and I have to like act like I'm a bucking bronco. And I hate to play bucking bronco. So I go to my listening partnership and I'm like, she wanted to play bucking bronco. And my friend called it the effing bucking bronco. And we laughed about how we hate it, and then I could go back and do it again. But if I didn't have my listening partnership where I was like, not bucking bronco again, I think I'd be like, oh, I don't think we have time for bucking bronco today. But I 5 minutes of listening. And then I could wake up the next morning and be like, I have an idea. Let's do 5 minutes of bucking bronco before we get dressed and get out the door. And then, so just as a little vignette of how the third piece called listening partnership makes it all come together.
I'll give you my one example of my go-to for listening partnerships. As a parent who, I have yelling in my roots. So I like to use listening partnerships to say all the things that I kind of wish I could say in the moment when my child is having behaviors that are annoying me. I bring that annoyance and that frustration and the mean things I'd like to say during those moments to listening partnerships. And I actually say them to my listening partnership person. So they're out. They're not like in my system anymore. It feels so good. So we're going to make that part of 100 Days of Winter. And we're going to send you links about how to get those supports for yourself too, if you're interested in those. Let's see. Any other last things we want to leave folks with? We're 5 minutes post our end time, but
people are happy to be in birth. Oh,
yay! It still exists.
We're still here. We'll be back here one day.
Oh. So thanks everybody. If you have post-event questions, head over to the Facebook group. We'll try to answer them there. And we did record this, so we'll send that recording out too. Feel free to share it with folks who couldn't make it. Thanks for being together.
Great to see everyone.